The Alumilite truss table is used around the world. It's lightweight, easy to assemble, and versatile. This instructional video will help you understand how to assemble the Alumilite truss table you see here. Your configuration may be different, but the same components can be used in a variety of safe systems. Make sure you reference your engineering drawings and assembly manuals before assembling the Alumilite truss table. Assembling an Alumilite truss table can efficiently be completed with only 2 people. Remember, you should always wear the appropriate safety equipment, including steel-toed boots and a hard hat. To assemble the Alumilite truss, you'll need to prepare a wide-open work area, at least the size of your Alumilite truss. You'll need to prepare a wide-open work area, at least the size of your completed Alumilite truss table. Set up 2 Aluma beams on the ground to give you a work surface on which to build the truss. You can also use pieces of lumber or workhorses, but make sure you'll be able to get your hands under the assembly as it is built. Bring in a top cord channel, that's the longer cord, and a bottom cord channel and place them on top of your work surface. Place them flat side up. The cord channels are designed with bolt holes to accept the vertical outer legs and the diagonal braces. Grab an outer leg and line it up with the correct bolt holes. These outer legs will become the vertical members of the truss. Next, you'll need to position the diagonal braces. Each diagonal brace also lines up with specific bolt holes. As you move around the truss, make sure each diagonal brace lines up with the correct holes. Now bring in another set of top and bottom cord channels and place them on top of the outer legs and diagonal braces. Make sure that the flat side is facing down. Before you begin bolting the structure together, you can distribute bolts, nuts, and lock washers around the truss. Now you're ready to begin bolting the structure together. Check the drawing and find the specific location for the cross brace bracket at the truss. At each connection, insert a bolt and fasten it with a nut and a lock washer. As you're installing the bolts for the outer legs, make sure you also attach the cross brace brackets at the same time. Move around the truss, tightening the bolts by hand. It's important that you just hand tighten everything before you measure and adjust the dimensions. You'll also need to add a bottom cord spacer between the bottom cord channels. Insert the spacer and bolt it in place. Before you secure all the connections on the truss with a socket wrench, you'll need to measure the truss. In order to ensure the accuracy of all the diagonal and square dimensions, measure the truss assembly from outside corner to outside corner. Because the assembly has not been tightened with a wrench, you'll be able to adjust the truss to match your exact dimensions. When your measurements are correct, begin tightening all bolts with a wrench. Make sure every connection is securely in place and every bolt is tightened. Now you're ready to install the extension legs and screw jacks. Take an inner leg, or extension staff, and slide it into the vertical outer leg at the center of the truss. Make sure it lines up with the bolt holes. Secure the inner leg in place by adding a U-pin. Insert a screw jack with the base plate attached into the bottom of the inner leg. Repeat this procedure by adding the extension staffs and screw jacks to the other outer legs. You've just completed one truss. Now you'll need to repeat this exact same procedure with a second truss. Let's watch it again. First, lay out all the pieces with the top and bottom cord set in position, flat side up. Add the outer legs and the diagonal braces and set the top cord and bottom cord in place, flat side down. Lay out the bolts, then methodically move around the assembly, inserting and tightening the bolts after checking the dimensions. Now insert the extension legs, the U-pins, and the screw jacks. Now with 2 trusses complete, you're ready to move on to the next step. Lift the first truss into a vertical position and prepare to connect the cross braces. Bring in a cross brace and connect it to the first truss. The cross brace is bolted into a cross brace bracket located in the top cord at a specified outer leg location. Connect the other end of the cross brace to the bottom cord while one person holds the cross brace in place. With the cross brace tightened by hand, attach the remaining cross braces. Lift the second truss into a vertical position and line up the cross braces on the first truss with the cross brace brackets on the second truss. Now attach the ends of the cross braces from the first truss to the second truss's cross brace brackets. Tighten the cross braces by hand. Before you secure all the cross brace connections with a socket wrench, you'll need to measure to make sure that the trusses are square and parallel. Measure the truss assembly from outside corner to outside corner. Because the cross braces have not been tightened with a wrench, you'll be able to adjust the truss to match your exact dimensions. When your measurements are correct, begin tightening the cross brace bolts with a wrench. Make sure every connection is securely in place and every bolt is tightened. For demonstration purposes only, we have pre-built a relatively lightweight panel and manually placed it on the secure Aluma-Lite truss. The first panel will be used to form the perimeter beam soffit and the walkway outside the building. Secure the panel to the truss using A-clamps. On the underside of the panel, attach the A-clamp to the truss top cord. And use a wrench to tighten the nut securely in place. Be sure to add bolts at all the intersections of the beams and the top cord. An inner leg extension used to create the required height adjustment is fitted into the top of the outer leg. This is made possible by the patented double hollow legs incorporated into the truss. Make sure you line up the holes and then set the leg extension in place with a U-pin. Add a screw jack into the inner leg and measure it to make sure that it matches your specific configuration. Lock the U-pin in place with a hitch pin for safety. Install an extension staff, a U-pin, and a screw jack on the other legs. Now you're ready to add the panel. Remember, adding the panels can be done with the help of a crane or a forklift. For demonstration purposes only, we have pre-built a panel and simply placed it on the ledger. Now attach it to the top of the screw jacks with Aluma bolts. Make sure you secure the panel with Aluma clamps at every intersection of the ledger and joist connection. Before we continue, you'll need to make a beam soffit panel. This is very easy and straightforward. First, place 2 ledgers. In this demonstration, we've used 2 Aluma 140 beams in a parallel position on the ground. You could also place these beams on top of a jig or workhorse. Place the pre-cut plywood on top of the Aluma beams and measure to make sure the dimensions are correct. Attach the plywood to the Aluma beams by nailing directly into the nail strip on the Aluma beams. Turn the panel face down. And attach two beam-side latch anchors on one side of the panel to create a beam-side latch. Use wood screws and a power screwdriver to attach the beam-side latch anchor. Attach two more beam-side latch anchors for the opposite side of the panel and secure them with wood screws. With the beam-side latch anchors in place, the beam soffit panel is complete. You also need to make a beam-side panel. Place a piece of pre-cut plywood on a flat surface. For demonstration purposes, we use the completed beam soffit panel as a work platform. Now attach a beam-side chamfer hinge to one side of the new panel using wood screws with a power tool. When you're ready to add the beam side panels, slide the beam side panel into the beam side rail beam on the existing panel, using the chamfer to guide it into place. Add the second beam side panel. The beam side rail beam and beam side chamfer form a hinge. You'll be adding another completed beam soffit panel. Again, adding the panels must be done safely and may require the help of a crane or a forklift. The completed beam soffit panel has been placed on top of the truss. Make sure it's exactly where you want it. Now secure it with A-clamps, just as before. The beam soffit panel is attached to the truss by tightening the A-clamp and bolt assembly at every truss and beam intersection. A beam side latch is attached to the latch anchor at the bottom of the soffit panel. The latch is fixed in position and bolted at the bottom. A second beam side panel is installed on the opposite side. You can also use steel packers to do an extension of a fixed height. Position 4 steel packers on top of the top truss cord. Bolt the packers into place with Aluma bolts. Again, measure the steel packers to ensure that they are positioned exactly in the right place. Once they are correctly placed, tighten the bolts. Place two ledgers. For this panel, we've used Aluma 140 beams on top of the secured packers. Measure to make sure the ledger beams are placed exactly where they are intended to be. Now bolt the ledger beam to the steel packer. As before, you'll need to build a panel to spec and have it lifted safely into place. Now bolt it into place with Aluma bolts. Adding the final panel is easy. Slide the beam side panels into place on both sides using the chamfer. Now the beam side rail beam and beam side chamfer form a hinge. Lock the hinge and you've completed the assembly of the Alumilite truss table.